Before 1971, the US dollar was directly linked to gold through the Bretton Woods system. Under this system, foreign central banks could exchange their US dollars for gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. This meant that the value of the US dollar was directly tied to the value of gold, and the amount of gold that the US government held in its reserves helped to back the value of the US dollar. However, in 1971, this all changed when President Richard Nixon suspended the direct convertibility of the US dollar to gold. This event, known as the Nixon shock, was a response to the increasing costs of the Vietnam War and the growing pressure on the US dollar as a reserve currency. The suspension of the gold standard had several consequences. First, it allowed the US government to print more money without having to worry about its value being tied to the amount of gold in its reserves. This led to high inflation in the 70s, as the increased supply of money caused the value of each dollar to decrease. Second, the suspension of the gold standard also made the US dollar the dominant global currency, as it was no longer tied to the value of gold. This gave the US government more flexibility in its monetary policy and allowed it to respond to economic conditions more quickly. Finally, the suspension of the gold standard also made the US dollar vulnerable to fluctuations in value due to market forces and economic conditions. While this increased flexibility can be beneficial in some cases, it also means that the value of the US dollar is subject to more volatility. So, that's a brief overview of how and why the US dollar stopped being backed by gold. The suspension of the gold standard in 1971 had both short-term and long-term consequences, including high inflation, the dominance of the US dollar as a global currency, and increased volatility in the value of the US dollar.